Let's now cross live to Mzwandile Mbeje, SABC News political editor, who was at the launch and joins us now for an update. Mzwandile, good evening to you. Your highlights and the biggest takeaway from the IFP manifesto. The IFP there completing a 13-point plan for South African issues.
Well, a very good evening to you, Alicia, and the viewers. Of course, the leader of the IFP spoke about what he called the 13 points. That is basically the key and the priorities that they'll be dealing with come this election. So one of the takeaways, as you have said, is that they've actually decided to stick to their tried and tested message when it comes to elections. Everything they are saying, they are basically saying, trust us. And I think what informs this is the fact that they have said they want to use the legacy of their founder, Prince Mngomezulu is the late, to then drive the message that the IFP is the party that can still be trusted to run government, particularly in KZN. And then, of course, they've made it clear, Alicia, that they want to have a very prominent role in the national affairs, as every party is hoping that they will be able to get the governing party below 50. So therefore giving other parties an opportunity perhaps to influence the direction of the country. But as you have correctly said in your intro there, issues around unemployment, load shedding, and then of course the work for people who are locals versus foreigners was very, very central as well. And another takeaway for me was the stipend, or what was rather the fund that will be given to the graduates who will be looking for employment for, I think, a period of about 12 months. So those are many areas that the IFP is trying to focus on. But of course, as you know, this is electioneering, so we don't know what South Africans will decide come the 29th of May, so that we are able to see some of the promises that the parties are saying if they'll be able to implement. So it was quite a very busy day. I must add, Alicia, that this was the third manifesto to be held here at Moses Mabhida. You know, the EFF held its manifesto here on the 10th of February and the ANC on the 24th of February, and the IFP is holding theirs on the 10th of March. Basically, it's also about the show of force. So all these parties were indeed to get their supporters to come out and attend the stadium. But the biggest question that they should be able to answer, will they convince these numbers and people sitting at home to go out and vote on the 29th of May? Because when all is said and done, it's about getting someone to go and vote.
Mzwandile, look, a lot of people saying that the party hasn't done enough in terms of praising itself. Did it come across in its manifesto that they're actually leveraging their successes and maybe inspire a renewed sense of proactiveness in going for pole position come the 29th of May?
What they are basically saying in the main, Alicia, is that they say their track record speaks for itself, but I would assume they are talking about the time when they were in power. Remember when the democratic elections began in 1994, for the first two terms, so it's the IFP that was running this province. So they're saying around that time the issues of corruption were less reported, so which basically means it's credit to the role and perhaps what they did in government then. But also they go back to when they were part of running the KwaZulu government, which was part of the apartheid creation. So, but I think what South Africans will do, because they have the opportunity of judging them, they are in a number of municipalities, particularly in KZN. The question would be, is there a difference that is noticeable where they are governing in the municipalities, or the municipalities are the same like across the country? As you know, that one of the biggest issues in the country right now is that the municipalities are generally dysfunctional when it comes to the issues of service delivery, is where they are governing different from where other parties are governing? I think that would be the question as well, as they try to prompt their success as they seek to get elected come 29th of May.
Very quickly, Mzwandile, now their participation in the multi-charter pact, could this be a deterrent for its supporters, you think?
I think they were very careful, and they are even very careful generally on that multi-party charter area. They are not touching much on it because we do know, Alicia, that not everyone is happy with their participation in the multi-party charter. And in fact, this is a much more of a loose arrangement. So clearly you can see that every party is hedging their own bet. So in case it doesn't work, you can see that they are willing to speak to any other parties. Because if you look at the people who comprise of the multi-party charter and perhaps look at the current electoral strengths, perhaps a lot more still needs to be done. But as we know that even within the party there are those that are not happy, I guess the results will then be the ones which will determine if indeed the IFP continues to be part of the multi-party charter.
Thank you for that. That is Mzwandile Mbeje, the SABC political editor, live to us from Durban. Well, Professor Bheki Mngomezulu, political analyst, is on the line with us to shed more light on the IFP's manifesto launch. Prof, once again, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Look, yesterday you had high hopes for this launch. The IFP manifesto approach was to respond to South Africans' daily lives, material conditions. Do you think this was resonant in the manifesto?
Thank you very much, my sister, for having me, and good evening to your viewers. I would say that in terms of providing substance to the 13-point plan that Honorable Velenkosini Hlabisa outlined, I would say they did well in terms of saying that not only are we highlighting these main points, but we're also putting meat to the bones to say that this is how we are planning to do that. So on that front, I think they did well. Where I think they fell short is the point that we're asking Mzwa about, that is in terms of them projecting themselves as people who have done well in different areas, more especially on the issue of corruption. When it comes to education, we know that there were a number of schools in KwaZulu-Natal that were controlled by the then KwaZulu government when they were in charge. And then when they assumed the leadership of the province in 1994, they were supposed to then highlight some of the things that they did while in office. The only time I heard Honorable Hlabisa talking about the role played by then Mngomezulu and the IFP was when he talked about the colleges of education, which he says they were closed, and most of those colleges, if not all, were built by then Mngomezulu. That is factually correct, but I think you should have projected it even further and then highlighted a number of other areas where they've done well, so that people can then see them differently. Lastly, I think his mistake was to assume that people know what they've done. If, for example, you make a statement and say history will speak for itself, or our activities speak for themselves, the assumption is that you work on the assumption that everybody knows what you are capable of, when in fact you have to spell it out, more especially to the youth who are not necessarily conversant with most of the issues you are talking about.
Prof, I mean, looking at that as well, let's look at their current performance at by-elections, for example, and how this is actually a preview of what will happen in the main elections. We know that the party has been significantly declining since 2006.
When it comes to by-elections, I think it's a missed opportunity. Maybe Honorable Hlabisa and his team worked on the assumption that people have seen them winning these by-elections, so there is nothing to talk about. When in fact other politicians would project even minor things and say this is what we've been able to do. The reality here is that when it comes to by-elections, the IFP has done exceptionally well in KwaZulu-Natal. But there are people who have a counter view. They say you cannot judge the performance of the party based on the by-elections for a number of reasons. One is that normally not everyone gets interested in by-elections, so most people decide not to participate. So the few that do participate then end up benefiting one political party and not others. But then I don't necessarily hold that view, but there is that view out there. The second point that people make is that when it comes to these by-elections, there are people who are passed in from other areas. Of course, the counter view will be, why don't we do the same? And then maybe they might say, we're trying to play it safe or to play everything according to the book. So there are a number of debates around that. But the reality is that on the by-elections, the IFP has done exceptionally well. No one can deny that.
And what lessons have they not learned, Prof? And is there a chance at this particular time to sway this narrative and revive itself? And let's say maybe decide to even join a pact with the MK, for example. This could be very interesting.
You cannot rule that one out, my sister. You know, in politics, we say anything is possible. Never say never in politics. Today we are my enemy, tomorrow we are comrades. So anything is possible. As things stand at the moment, my view is that the decision by the IFP to join the multi-party pact was not a correct one, in my view. But I'm not an IFP member, so then, of course, I have all the right to say that. And one of the things that buttresses my assertion is that you recall that the Youth League at some point, this is the IFP Youth Brigade, they expressed their concerns about the same decision, saying that they were not happy about it until then the leadership of the party to sit down with them and try to reason with them. So those who are not necessarily interested in DA politics will ask themselves the question, is my vote going to go to the IFP when they are working with the DA? Those are the questions they'll be asking. As for the MK is a new party, and then, of course, anything is possible. If we don't have an outright winner, which is the direction we're headed, by the way, so if you don't have an outright winner, then it means that you cannot rule any political party out, which is why I had an issue with political parties like the DA, when they emphatically said that they are not going to work with the ANC, they are not going to work with the EFF. I said, what if they are short of a few seats, which seats would be obtained by working with these other political parties? Are they going to be men enough and then humble themselves and say, we are sorry, please let us work together? Because right now, from where I'm standing, I don't see any single political party getting the 50+1 threshold. There will be no winner, in my view. There will be a coalition, either a coalition of the bigger parties, which we call the Grand Alliance, or a coalition of the smaller parties, which we call a minority alliance. But either way, I don't see an outright winner.
All right, Prof, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for that. Professor Bheki Mngomezulu, the political analyst, with a wrap analysis of the IFP's manifesto launch.